Hey, all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie, and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book is a sad one, at least for me it was. It's called Did I Ever Tell You? A Memoir by Genevieve Kingston. The premise of this memoir is very unique in that Kingston's mother, who died when Kingston was only 11 years old, left her little presents that filled a trunk that Kingston was to open throughout her life for birthdays and other major events like graduations and getting her driver's license and her wedding, etc. Her mother and a life without her mother is the central idea of the book. I lost my mother to lung cancer when I was 33 years old, and that was horrible, just horrible. So I can't imagine what it would be like to lose your mom as a child. I'm really interested in how writers showcase such mother-daughter relationships and their loss, so Did I Ever Tell You was an easy pick for me, although I knew it would probably be upsetting to me. It was, but in a sad yet beautiful way. Kingston's mother's battle with cancer was a long one. Kingston's writing is very lyrical as she describes one stage of her mother's illness after another, at least capturing as much as she could understand in her younger years. She even watched her mother work on the boxes that would become such a large part of her life after her mom died. Let me read you this part because it's an interesting paradox here. Sometimes my mother sat at the head of the table, other times along one side, moving as she completed one mysterious task and began another. Some days she spent hours sorting objects into the boxes, writing on little white note cards and threading them with ribbon. The way she'd once pored over the results of clinical trials, she now bent her dark head over bright little packages, tying bow after bow. Tippy would sit with her sometimes, his black and white head cocked, as if a scrap might fall from that table we never seemed to eat on. Greedy for her attention, I tried to distract her from her project. "Let's go swimming. Or let's play Mancala. You can go first." "Later, honey bun. I'm in the middle of something." The meaning of later was narrowing every day. As the weeks passed, I began to hate the boxes. There were so many of them, like so many years stretching ahead without her. How could the boxes be more important to her than I was? I felt jealous of my future self, the hypothetical girl my mother was thinking about while I was standing right in front of her. I imagined upending the table and sending all the boxes and ribbon and lists and note cards crashing to the floor. But the table was too heavy for me. Oh, Kingston does a fabulous job at capturing these kinds of moments throughout her book. Here she wants her mom to play with her, yet her mom is more focused on what she'll leave behind. It's these sort of moments that would just catch my breath in the book. My mother told me knowing she was dying was the worst part of all. She would have preferred a sudden death. In the early days of her cancer, I did get her to write her childhood memoir. Once her cancer had come back for the third time, she had me label all the stuff in her curio cabinet. When I asked her if she wanted to go through any of the other stuff, she shook her head. No way. She wanted no part of it. I envied Kingston as she opened one box after another, or even found VHS tapes and letters that her mother had written to her and her older brother, because on some level, even in my age, I wish my mother would have left me such messages. She did to her 3 grandchildren, but only upon their engagement. Kingston clung to such pieces, although at times she didn't always connect to the stuff her mother left her, like the jewelry, pins and necklaces, and the pain she felt when a necklace she actually liked and wore broke on the school dance floor, or the couple times her mother forgot to write a note in the scrapbook that showed each item, as if her mother's words were 1,000 times more important than the item. Kingston captures her childhood well, the camaraderie of women who helped take care of her mother, her worry that every time she left her mother would be the last time she would see her. Just imagine that for a second, how traumatic for a child to suffer through. She had to have her dad pick her up in the middle of the night at her first sleepover, her close connection with her older brother, even her dad marrying a new woman. Kingston has melded all these events seamlessly, most in relatively short chapters. I particularly enjoyed the epiphanies Kingston had after her mother died. When Kingston gets her period 5 months after her mother dies, she opens the envelope designated for such an event. It's an audio tape, which Kingston shares her mother's exact words with her readers. And here's what Kingston is thinking about afterwards, this 12-year-old girl with such deep thoughts. It's really beautiful. So my mother had grown up in the same neighborhood, gone to the same school, yet until her death, I'd never pictured her as a little girl, never considered the manner in which her childhood had unfolded just down the street all those years before. For this first time, but not the last, I regretted my lack of curiosity about my mother, about the person she had been for most of her life, in the decades before I was born. Somehow she had known that I would one day want to know these things about her, and she had answered questions I hadn't even thought to ask. Ugh, if only we could all have such epiphanies at that age. I could have asked my mother anything then. Now I can't. Kingston struggles to go to college, the separation too much for her. I don't want to reveal too much of her adult life, as there are a couple of heartbreaking tragedies in the story that I didn't see coming. She does find out some things about her parents' marriage, and what's most interesting is that Kingston's mother had prepared her huge community of friends for Kingston's questions. They waited for her to find them. Hence the Did I Ever Tell You title, a perfect one. I can't imagine the willpower Kingston had of not opening everything in the boxes at once. Once Kingston is an adult, the story does seem to encapsulate so much material. At times I wish she would have developed some aspects more, or perhaps even eliminated other aspects that didn't seem to fit as well. But really, her entire story revolves around her mother's death, and the little boxes left behind as Kingston tries to navigate growing up without her mother. I just love this idea of leaving little trinkets behind. Two of my mother's grandchildren were 5 and 6 when she died. For my sister's baby shower, I planned this grand present giving since she was going to be the only granddaughter. My mom and I shopped for a gift for each birthday up until the baby turned 18. The idea was to capture the essence of our childhoods for the new baby, and I thought it would be so retro for my niece to open up gifts that were bought so long ago. When she turned 3 or 4, my mom told me that my sister didn't want to store all that stuff and she just gave everything to her on that birthday. I was so mad, especially once my mom died a couple years later. How precious would those gifts have been then? How could a 3 or 4-year-old make a decision on something that was supposed to be given when she was 16? My mom didn't seem to care all that much at the time, but it made my blood boil. And that's one of the things I constantly thought about while I read Did I Ever Tell You? Those things can't stand in for the person who is no longer with you, but they can show you so much. Kingston's mother even leaves an additional letter letting her children know that the gifts aren't even the key to all of this. It's that she was thinking about them and wanted them to know that she thought of them in all these moments that she would miss. That part was just so heartbreaking for me, especially when I thought of my mother and her grandchildren. My apologies for talking more about myself in the book. It's just I felt so connected to Kingston, which I figured I would. So let me try to look at this book as though I haven't lost a parent. Would I still have liked it as much? The answer is yes, and it might have even had a more profound meaning on me. It would have inspired me to start asking questions, to go through boxes with those living parents and ask what such things meant. It would have been capturing who my mother was as a complete person, not just the part I knew as mom. Why is it that we just move out and move on, and then time goes by and more time goes by, and then when our parents get old and eventually die, we don't care 2 bits about their stuff? Remember the book Secondhand, which I did a Booksmart episode about before Christmas? Families even hire someone else to go through their parents' belongings. Why don't we care at all? We should. That doesn't mean you have to keep their stuff, but you should see it before you throw it out, especially anything they wrote. If you need a bit of convincing, let me read you a couple paragraphs from the author's note at the very end of the book, because it's really a lesson to learn. On February afternoon, while making final edits to this book, I stumbled upon an unmarked green folder tied with a black ribbon. The folder contained a thin stack of my mother's letters I'd never seen before. They were addressed to my brother and me, but unlike the letters in the cardboard chest, they were not marked for specific occasions. Instead, they were dated like journal entries written during the years between her terminal diagnosis and the destruction of her sight. I was stunned. Not only did they provide me with new insights into my mother's thoughts, they also offered an invaluable corroboration of the timeline I've been trying so hard to reconstruct from old photographs, web searches, and interviews with family and friends. The experience of researching and writing this book has been full of moments like this one. Impossible gifts suddenly dropped in my lap without explanation. Committing this story to paper has been like trying to take hold of something ever expanding. Each time I believe I've found the last of my mother's secret clues, her hidden envelopes, boxes, and instructions, I'm proven wrong. When I look again, there is always more. Remember that. There is always more. And remember that when you consider your own legacy too. So yes, you should read Did I Ever Tell You, no matter if you've lost a parent or not. You should read Kingston's memoir because her beautiful prose will force you to pause and consider your own parents, the lives that they lived, that they were more than just mom or dad, that the time to ask questions is now because you won't have a chance later. Thanks for watching. As always, my goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.